Hello everyone, welcome back. Today also we'll be doing yet again with chapter 4, that is trading globalization. Okay, in our previous class we discussed about how what globalization is, how slowly by slowly it began to spread, as well as we discussed about endangered labor. Today we'll be studying about post-war recovery. Okay, it is related with the First World War. Okay, so during the First World War, British was also involved in the war, and it also had to go through a tremendous period of crisis because of the war. Okay, while Britain was busy fighting the battle, okay, countries like India and Japan, okay, took the opportunity and they began to develop at a very huge scale. Okay, and at this rate, okay, Britain also had to borrow money. Okay, Britain also had to borrow money from USA because they were not able to finance the war, okay, which they were fighting, and in order to fight the war they needed money. Okay, and so they had to borrow the money from USA. And this meant, okay, what happened was, after the war got over, okay, Britain was left with so much debt, okay, and it was overburdened by the war. Okay, so what it had to do was it had to pay a huge amount of money to the Americans because they borrowed the money. And so the British people, they went into a huge external debt. Okay, when the war was happening, okay, what happened was it led to a economic boom. Okay, it led to an economic boom where most of the people, they wanted goods, okay, in terms of war goods, ammunitions, rifles, tanks, okay, ships, as well as airplanes. Okay, they wanted all fighter planes. Okay, they wanted all this type of industries, they wanted all these supplies at a very fast rate, and so a huge number of industries came about, okay, in order to meet the demands of the war. And so during the war, what happened was many people got employed, okay, and also production was on a very large scale. Okay, but unfortunately what happened was, when the war ended, okay, now when the war ended, nobody needs this ammunition, nobody wanted this tanks, nobody wanted this fighter planes, right? So what happened was, eventually, okay, people began to lose their job, people were unemployed, okay, because during the war everything was in demand and they need a huge number of labor force in order to build these kind of things. Okay, so what happened when the war ended? Okay, the things were not required, and so a huge number of people in in these countries, okay, began to lose their job. Okay, and as stated in 1921, okay, 1 out of 5 British people, they were all out of work because they were unemployed. Okay, and also problems arise in the agricultural sector also. Okay, before the war, okay, Europe was the major producer of wheat, okay, and they also supplies to most of the countries. But when the First World War started, Europe was not able to produce as much as it produced before. Okay, so what happened? Okay, America as well as Canada and Australia, they took up the role of growing wheat, okay, up to a very large scale. And so Europe, after the war was over, it began to revive again. Okay, Europe revived its wheat cultivation, and so when it began to revive, okay, wheat production became very excess. And okay, when they brought this wheat to the market, okay, slowly by slowly the price of wheat began to fall down, which caused problems for the farmers. Okay, so when you have products which are there in abundance, okay, it will become cheaper and cheaper, right? If it's not available in the market, it will become more expensive. Okay, so what happened here was, after the World War was over, Europe again revived back its wheat crops. Okay, but what happened was, already America, Canada and Australia were producing in return of European countries, because they were fighting the war, what happened was crop began to be overproduced, okay, and the price of grain began to decline at a very large scale. So these were some of the problems which was faced after the war was over, and how slowly by slowly when they were recovering. Okay, first what happened was British had to pay a huge amount of money, okay, and then employment was boosted during the First World War, but slowly by slowly after the war got over, okay, people started losing their job because the things that they produced were not in demand, okay, and also Europe was one of the major wheat producing countries, but when it declined, many other countries rose up, okay. So after the war, Europe also again rose up in its wheat cultivation, leading to overproduction of crops, and many people began to suffer because of this. Moving on, we have the rise of mass production and consumption. Okay, so during the 1920s, okay, US began to emerge as one of the countries which was doing mass production, okay, and this was mainly started by one person, that is Henry Ford, who is also one of the pioneers of the assembly line. So he was the one, okay, who introduced this assembly line, okay. So his company was mainly based on making automobiles, okay, in terms of making cars. So what happened, in order to produce one car, it took him almost 2 to 3 months, or maybe more, 4 than 5 months to complete one car. So what he decided was he built up a assembly line where one engine will be made by a person, and then it will be passed on to the other. So you can just check it out here. So different people are handling different work, okay. So once their work is done, it will slowly move forward, okay. So that is the assembly line, which was started by Henry Ford. Okay, so Henry Ford was popularly known for a car model which he made, that is the T model Ford, which was one of the best selling automobile car during this time, and which was also produced at a very large rate. Okay, people who were working in the Ford company, okay, had to go through grueling working hours, and also they were not paid much, and also they were not able to cope up with the speed of the work which is being done. And so most of the employees in the Ford company began to quit their job in large numbers, okay. And so what happened was Ford, okay, Mr. Ford, what happened, he thought to himself, okay, and he said, if this keeps on continuing, okay, I will lose my company, as well as I will not be able to cope up with the losses, okay. So what he did was, on January of 1914, okay, he increased the wage of the workers to $5 a day, okay. If he completes the work, then he will get $5 a day. That was a easy technique and easy method which was adopted by Henry Ford in order to bring back all the laborers back to the factory, okay. So what happened was that once he introduced this policy, many people began to come back to the company in order to work again, okay. And so with this, okay, he started making this automobiles at a very large rate, okay. And at the meantime, the people who were working in the factory were also getting a huge amount of money because they were working in the factory, okay, and they were getting $5 per day. So what happened, their livelihood began to improve because they were getting huge amount of money. And most of the people, they wanted to work in the Ford company because it was making them rich day by day, with which when they started earning more, they started buying products in terms of television set, okay, in terms of washing machine, okay, in terms of refrigerator, in terms of radio, okay. They started buying gramophones, okay, etc. People started buying more products because they were becoming rich day by day. And so it not only benefited the Ford company, but also it benefited the industries which were producing televisions, which were producing refrigerators, okay. This led to the expansion, okay, as well as the increase of economy in US at large. Okay, moving on, we have the Great Depression. Okay, so Great Depression was a moment, okay, or a time in history where the whole world suffered. Okay, likewise, we have been discussing like in the World War what happened, right? Demands were at large, many industries and factories came about, but when the World War came to an end, many people, they became unemployed. Okay, this also led to the Great Depression. Okay, people became unemployed, they started getting low profit, okay, and also prices of goods began to fall down because there was overproduction which was happening around the world. Okay, it not only affected one country but affected the whole countries. Okay, clear. Mainly those areas which were affected were the industries, heavy steel industries and iron industries, okay, as well as in the agricultural sector and in the mining sector. Okay, agriculture sector would be people started producing more crops which began to be overproduced, which led to the prices going down, later making the farmers suffer more and more. Mining industries also was a problem because people did not want to get access with the mines that they were producing because they were unemployed. Okay, so when they are unemployed, they are not able to buy those products which are being mined. Okay, because of which, okay, there were many reasons. Coal mines were also there. Coal mines were not in use, okay, after the war at large scale, because of which the mining industries also began to crumble down. Okay, so this Great Depression started from around 1929 and lasted till the middle part of 1930. Okay, so what happened was the stock market crashed in 1922 or 29. Okay, clear. But it was not the effect of the Great Depression, but it was in such a time that the stock market crashed, because of which it was not able to go up. Okay, the stock market was finding very difficult to go up. Okay, and the depression ended in around 1935, which also caused many political changes. Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was the president of USA at the time, what he did was he introduced a new deal. Okay, we will discuss about that later on. Okay, so what was the reason which caused the Great Depression? Number one was the agricultural overproduction. Likewise, we mentioned about Europe, right? Europe before the war was a major producer of wheat, but slowly when the war happened, they were not able to cultivate, and so other countries which depended on Europe had to produce their own goods. Okay, so when everything came back, okay, when everything was going back to normal, Europe started producing more wheat. Okay, and they were not able to transport this wheat to other foreign countries because they were already producing wheat at large scale. Okay, that was also another problem. And once they were selling this product in the market, it became cheaper and cheaper because it was on high demand. Everybody started selling it at cheap rates, and the farmers had to suffer at large because they were not earning as much as they were earning before. Okay, second was the price of shares in USA, okay, which went up beyond the real value. Okay, stock markets, okay, or shares in US began to go up by 1920s. Okay, but again in October 1928 it rapidly began to decline. Okay, the stock market or the stock shares which US was keeping it high went suddenly down by 1929. Okay, and people began to sell off their shares at a very cheap rate. Okay, so 13 million shares were sold in a day. okay, were sold in a day. In a single day, 13 million shares were being sold at a very fast rate with cheap price, because they knew that they were going to face financial problems. So because of which they started selling this shares at a very short time. Okay, and many people also lost their money. Okay, banks and business began to shut down because they were not able to cope up with the depression, and so unemployment again started at a very large scale. Okay, by 1932, 12 million people were already unemployed in US. Okay, the third situation was drought. There were many places which faced drought, okay, which also led to the crop failure, and most of the places in US began to the soil began to turn into dust. Okay, and also thousands of farmers left their land because it was uncultivatable. Okay, and what happened was most of the farmers who were cultivating crops, they shifted to towns and cities because industries began to flourish at large. Okay, because they wanted to work in industries, and so farming in most of the areas began to decline. Okay, so what happened was Franklin D. Roosevelt, he introduced a New Deal, okay, which introduced protection for people's savings. Okay, so what happened was during the Great Depression, all the economy was crashing down, and so what happened, all the money which were being saved were also being deducted. So what happened, Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was the 10th president of the USA, he introduced a new policy, okay, which was called as the New Deal, and according to which, okay, he introduced the protection of people's savings, and new regulation of banks also came about. Okay, and so we'll be looking into India in the Great Depression, how India also suffered with the Great Depression. Okay, so India's export and import nearly declined between the years of 1928 to 34. Indians were not able to export their goods to other foreign countries because they were also having huge financial crisis, and with which, okay, importation of goods was also becoming lesser and lesser by 1928. Okay, and as the US, okay, market began to fail, okay, prices in India also began to go down. Okay, so what happened, wheat began to wheat prices began to fall of 50% by 1928 to 34. Okay, with which, okay, and the peasant community suffered more than the urban modern people. Why? Because these peasants were the one who were depending on the import and export of goods, and also they depended on the market to sell off their product. Okay, a huge number of jute producers from Bengal, okay, they produce raw jute. Okay, so in order to make gummy bags, okay, these are known as gummy bags, which were used during the World War at large, because during the war they needed such kind of bags in order to carry goods as well as use for bunkers, okay, in order to fill them with soil and use it for making bunkers. Okay, so during the World War, the British demand for gummy bags was at very large. Okay, and India exported a huge amount of gummy bags. Okay, but what happened after the war, this jute, okay, and gummy bags, their prices began to fall down by 60%. Okay, and the peasants, they began to take loans, and they were not able to pay these loans because their business were all falling down, because people did not need jute anymore. Okay, and what they had to do is they had to resort to keeping their land as mortgage. Okay, if they were not able to pay the money, their land would be taken away, okay, by governments or maybe by private firms or the money lenders. Okay, and also the farmers or peasants, they began to sell off their jewelries in order to fill up, or in order to pay the debts that they had taken from the money lenders or from the government. Okay, so during these years, what happened was India became one of the exporters of gold. Okay, so India began to supply the world with gold. Okay, so this gold also helped recover the economy of most of the countries, especially the British people, because India was a colony, okay, of the British people. And so Indians, once they were starting to export gold, what happened? It benefited the British people in return, okay, and it helped Britain to recover fast from the war that they had fought with the other parties, okay, and they had to pay a huge amount of loan to US, right? So what happened was, when India started exporting this gold, it indirectly benefited the British officials, okay, and this, okay, when everything was going on, Gandhiji also launched his civil disobedience movement in regard of protest against the British people. Okay, so that is all for today. We will continue with the rest of the topics in your next class. Thank you and have a nice day.